Good evening, everyone. It's so wonderful to see such a crowd here tonight, especially knowing there's so much competition going on for other events around campus, but we know we have the best one here. Welcome to Living History, Women and Public Art in Philadelphia. I'm Terry Boyer, and I have the pleasure of directing the Ann Walsh McNulty Institute for Women's Leadership. Tonight's program is part of the Institute's Legacies of Leadership series, where we hear directly from leaders about their experience and expertise to highlight the diverse ways that leadership is practiced and to inspire others to lead authentically in their own unique manner. Tonight's program will focus specifically on the world of public art in Philadelphia. It was a collaborative effort that would not have been possible without the support of many partners. In particular, I'd like to thank Cynthia DiBartolo of Tigris Financial Partners, our lead sponsor of the event, and our co-sponsors who include the Albert LePage Center for History in the Public Interest, the Department of History, the Art History Program, and the BU Art Gallery, as well as logistical support from the Office of Alumni Relations. To hear more about tonight's program, as well as its related events, I'd like to introduce Dr. Leah Perez, Assistant Professor of Art History. Leah.
Hi everyone, I'm so glad you're here with us tonight. Before we move into the artist presentations, I want to offer a few remarks. Tonight, we are going to have what I hope will be a thought-provoking and timely conversation between the artists Maia Chao, Karyn Olivier, and Michelle Angela Ortiz. I organized this event in dialogue with Jenny Castillo, the director and curator of the Villanova University Art Gallery, with the support of the LePage Center and the McNulty Institute for Women's Leadership. And I want to especially thank Terry Boyer and Ingrid Lees and Cynthia DiBartolo for their support of the event. Some of you joined us for the reception upstairs in the art gallery, where we have a preview of the exhibition Life as It Could Be, The Red Rose Girls, curated by students in my curatorial practice graduate seminars from a group of artists working in Philadelphia and Villanova at the beginning of the 20th century, known for their illustrations and their public art. Amidst the current political climate, I believe that their work is more urgent and timely than ever. The artists will be joined in conversation by Katie Lee, the Penn Medicine Assistant Curator of Contemporary Art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and an alum, I'm proud to say, of the Villanova Art History program. Previously, she was Exhibitions and Programs Manager at Transformer, a nonprofit arts institution in Washington, D.C. And she's also worked at museums including the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, MoMA PS1, the Smithsonian American Art Museum, and the Barnes Foundation. I'm delighted to welcome Katie Lee, our moderator for tonight, to start the conversation and introduce the artists, who will each share their work for about 10 minutes. This will be followed by a discussion between Katie and the artists, and we will open things up for questions at the end. So please join me in welcoming Katie Lee.
Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight. Thank you to the university for the invitation. My name is Katie, and as Leah said, I am the Penn Medicine Assistant Curator of Contemporary Art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. One of my primary responsibilities is leading a collaborative project with Penn Medicine, curating artworks by Philadelphia-based artists for their new Pavilion Hospital for Critical Care that was designed by Norman Foster and Partners. The project is a large-scale public art initiative dedicated to shaping and enhancing the experience of being at a hospital for Penn Medicine patients, visitors, and staff. As such, I have spent a great deal of time considering the remit of public art, its audience, its impact, and the ways in which people encounter it. While this particular project focused on Philadelphia-based artists, I have not had the opportunity to work directly with Maia, Michelle, and Karyn. That makes it especially exciting and an honor to be here tonight in conversation with them. Tonight's discussion will focus on public art, a vast and dynamic category that encompasses murals, sculptures, performances, temporary installations, graffiti, and much, much more. The setting, scope, and audience for public art can vary dramatically from one project to another. Philadelphia itself offers a rich tapestry of public art, from the sculptures at City Hall, to the Love sculpture, to the iconic Rocky statue. Public art serves many purposes. It can commemorate a person, an event, or a movement. It can provoke thought, foster dialogue, or even serve as a form of resistance. We are joined tonight by three fantastic Philadelphia-based artists, each of whom have engaged with public art in diverse and meaningful ways, both throughout Philadelphia and beyond. They will be sharing projects spanning from 2015 to the present day, yet even their earlier works remain powerfully relevant in today's charged political climate. In a time when the arts, immigration, free speech, scientific advancements, and more are precarious and face increasing challenges, their work addresses these issues in ways that are both urgent and deeply resonant. Our conversation tonight is intentionally open-ended in how we define public art. We hope you leave with a broader understanding of its meaning and significance. Public art reflects the way we see the world. It's an artist's response to the current moment. It has the power to beautify, to transform, to generate discourse, to challenge, and to serve as a vital form of resistance. With that, I'd like to introduce all three artists at the outset so we can move smoothly into our discussion. Our first speaker will be Michelle Angela Ortiz, who is a visual artist, muralist, filmmaker, and community arts educator who amplifies marginalized voices by transforming spaces into powerful sites of storytelling through public art, documentaries, and community projects. Over the past 25 years, she has led more than 50 public art projects, including as a cultural envoy with the U.S. Embassy in countries including Mexico, Argentina, Spain, and Cuba. Ortiz has been a Philadelphia Cultural Treasures Fellow, a Pew Fellow, and a Rauschenberg Foundation Artist as Activist Fellow, among many other honors. Her work has been recognized by Americans for the Arts as one of the country's outstanding public art projects. Maia Chao is an artist working across social practice, film, and performance, often engaging with institutions and the public in unexpected ways. Her work has been commissioned by the Hirshhorn Museum, the Shed, and Tufts University Art Galleries, and has been exhibited at the Bronx Museum, RISD Museum, and Chufrito's Gallery. A Fulbright grantee, Maia has also been a Pew Fellow, a Skowhegan alum, and is currently the public artist in residence at the Times Square Alliance. She is a member of the artist-run space Vox Populi in Philadelphia and teaches at the Maryland Institute College of Art. Last but not least, is Karyn Olivier, who reimagines everyday objects and spaces through sculptures, installations, and public art to uncover hidden histories and collective memory. Born in Trinidad and Tobago, she has exhibited internationally, including at the Whitney Biennial, Prospect 6, and Documenta 15, with solo shows at Tanya Bonakdar Gallery and major commissions like the Newark Airport's Terminal A. Olivier has received numerous awards, including a 2025 USA Fellowship, a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Joan Mitchell Foundation Award, and grants from Creative Capital and the Pollock Krasner Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Michelle to the stage.
Hello, everyone. It's just an honor to be in this space and to also share my work with all of you today, and also with the amazing other artists that are part of this panel. So it's such a treat to be here and to share this work with you. Okay, so I'm going to get right to it. Oops, is this the right direction? Yes, okay. So what I'm going to share with you, there's been many projects that I've worked on, but specifically the project that has its longest run has been my Familias Separadas project. Familias Separadas, which stands for Separated Families, is a project that I created in 2013 at the height of the deportations that were happening under the Obama administration. And it was really important for me to create this project. And the goal, the specific goal, was to really shift the perspective of the statistics of how many people have been deported or affected by detention deportation to the personal stories of the mothers, the children, the communities that are directly impacted by this. And so my project developed in 3 different phases that were meant to act as ripples in water. Phase 1 was a project that started here in Philadelphia in 2015, and that particular project gave way in representing the stories of 5 different families. I worked together with Juntos, which is an immigrant rights organization based in South Philadelphia, and beginning to conduct interviews and workshops with community members. That then evolved into site-specific public art installations around different locations in the city. That then moved into Harrisburg, which was the second phase was in Harrisburg, which I'll be showing some examples, especially during the elections of the new governor. And then the third became national. So we started here in Philadelphia, then it became statewide, and then we selected 3 different cities in 2020 through 2021 at the height of the pandemic, and working with a lot of the folks that were directly impacted by the system of detention. And mass incarceration as it's connected. So this image is the image of Eres Mi Todo. It's a painting of Maria. Maria's husband lived in Philadelphia and was deported, and he attempted to cross the border again to be reunited with his family. And so during that recrossing, he was caught by ICE in Texas and served a 3-year sentence in California, and then was eventually deported back to Mexico. And so this image of portrait that I created, which is an 18-inch by diameter painting with her daughter, and the words Eres Mi Todo and the images behind were coming directly from the letters that Jose, her husband, would be sending to her during his time in detention. This image was then blown into a larger scale, 18 feet in diameter, and was placed at the Compass Rose by Edmund Bacon. And so in the center of the city, so this is the Compass Rose where north, south, east, and west meet in the city. And so in this context, it's centering Maria's story at the same level of importance as William Penn, as the William Penn statue looming over her. And also sharing her story as a single mother who's now raising 5 children. And her story, like the compass, serves as a symbol of migration and its connection to many immigrant families navigating through these unjust systems. So this is just a detail of the image itself. All of these, there were 5, I'm just showing you some, but there were 5 different installations that were happening during this phase, and each one of them had QR codes where folks can actually hear and listen to Maria's story. Eres Mi Todo is the piece, You Are My Everything, which are the words of Jose, and this is his youngest son sitting by the words of his father. Part of this also first phase of work was an installation in front of the Immigration Customs Enforcement building on 16th and Callowhill in Philadelphia. It's actually the first point of detention where many loved ones within the community are detained. And so on October 12th, on Indigenous Peoples Day, I organized over 30 volunteers and undocumented families to place the words of Ana, an undocumented mother, in front of the ICE building in Philadelphia. And together, we installed, whoops, sorry about that. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Okay, together we installed the 90-foot-long words, "We are human beings risking our lives for our family and our future." And these words were placed at the exit point where the detained family members that are in the building are then transported out to other prisons or other centers to process their deportation. One of the things that I speak about is around the risk that we take as artists, but also understanding our privilege and and our positioning, right? And how important it is to ensure the care and the security of the community when they are also taking risk. And so one of the things that I mention in particular about this piece is that it really took about three weeks in trying to speak to the Streets Commissioner in ensuring that the families who are undocumented, who would never step foot into this space, would be safe and not detained during the time that we were doing this installation. And so this wasn't done in 2015, before the Black Lives Matter street murals, and so this was just a beautiful and critical and powerful moment for me, because ICE agents were looking down at us as we were installing this piece. But also I was able to be a resource when some of the Black Lives Matter murals were happening in 2020, because I was able to share not just the processes of how to do this piece, but also to talk about intention and care and ethics and responsibility in doing this work. And this is a beautiful picture of Alma, so it gives you a sense of the scale, standing in front of these words, human, and with her children. And during this time, she was fighting also for the release of her husband, who was also detained. And so in 2017, so kind of in between phases, I partnered with the Shut Down Burkes Coalition, which is a statewide rights group, immigrant rights group, to find ways to advocate for the closure of the Berks County Residential Center. Berks is the first family prison in the United States located in Pennsylvania that has detained children and parents, and the other existing family immigrant prisons still exist in Texas. And so for 7 months, in between these phases, I started working and connecting with mothers that were detained at this detention center with their children. And, the mothers were focusing on their cases, right? They were focusing on their campaigns, which was the narrative around how they've been victims of systems. And for me, it was really important that through the act of creation in these pieces, through writing, through interacting with the mothers, that we would talk about their dreams, and we would talk about their definitions of freedom, or when they were envisioning freedom. And so we were able to create this 1,600 hand-dyed paper flowers that spelled the words out, Libertad. And this included the flowers that were created with the mothers at Berks, because there were very limited materials I was able to bring into the prison when I was visiting the mothers. And then through a series of workshops that I gave at the Barnes Foundation, it became, as a sense, like a meal where people would sit down and actually create the flowers, and the flowers became a point of entry to share about what was happening at Berks, but also to involve people in the different ways in which they could take action. And that's the piece. So the piece itself was displayed at the north gates of City Hall, and also in other actions have been at the Independence Mall. So I continued my work with the 4 mothers, and this is just one of the larger installations that I did on the Capitol steps in Harrisburg. And so through this phase 2 with Familias Separadas, I did a total of 8 public artworks that included billboards. And in this case, this was the eyes of Karyn and her son, Stephen. Karyn was detained, as well with the other 14 mothers, for 2 years at the Berks prison, and her son at age 6 had already 2 suicidal attempts while he was in the prison. Unfortunately, Karyn was one of the 10 families, 10 mothers that were then deported back. So they were not released like the other mothers and deported back. And so it was really important to bring the image of Karyn and her son Stephen into this space so that they would not be ignored. And so all of these installations were created and strategically placed in the commuting route of Governor Tom Wolf as he would enter and go into the city of Harrisburg and enter into these gates or the space that are the Capitol steps. And these were some of the phrases that came, and just the juxtaposition of there's a time to pray and a time to fight that's engraved onto the piece, right? And then it's, what would you tell your son if he asks, why can't I be free? And those were the actual words of Karyn. And so Karyn's image itself was placed along with these other installations. These are some of the billboards that were also created with the mother's messages. And eventually, all of this was documented through a film that I created, which is a 30-minute documentary called Las Madres de Berks. And Las Madres de Berks shares the testimonials of the 4 mothers, so 3 of them that remain in the US and 1 which is Karyn, who was deported back to El Salvador. And the great thing about film and being able to present this piece was that it was a way of kind of organizing, sharing the organizing efforts and the public artwork, but centering the stories on the mothers, right? And not just them speaking about how they've been victims, again, of the system, but there's really tender, beautiful moments in the film where a mother is singing a song to her child that she would sing when they were in the prison as a way of calming and soothing her child. So there's just an immense amount of just respect and inspiration that I have for the mothers, because in the midst of a system that is devaluing their human existence and criminalizing them, they still find a way to show love and security to their children. And so the film itself also serves as a way to advocate. So we did a number of 25 screenings. I believe we did a screening here in Villanova. And the screenings themselves represent the stories without having to re-traumatize the families and sharing their stories again. But we also paired up with organizers in different places along the state of Pennsylvania to advocate for the closure. So I'm happy to say that now it's been 3 years that the Berks Family Prison has been closed. So yes, we can clap to that because that's a victory. But we are still under this current administration, and as I had mentioned, whether it's Democratic or Republican, right, we're still running the risk of these prisons and these spaces in being created. And so I think that the documentary and the work that's been done serves as an example of community power and putting the community members directly impacted at the forefront of this fight. And I believe that that's what we just need to know, is have that reminder that we did win and we can continue to do that. This is phase 3 of Familias Separadas project, which again, as I mentioned, kind of spread out into different spaces. This is in Dover, New Hampshire, and so the images that you see here are the installations of images of G and Mark, both who are African immigrants. There's a large population of African immigrants in Dover, New Hampshire, and I worked hand in hand with the Americans Friends Service Committee in Dover. And so these installations were strategically placed in proximity to the immigrant detention centers. And in addition to the installation of these massive, they're 20 feet tall banners in a sense, there were also activations with the community where marches were occurring from the location to the detention center, but then also there were celebrations that were created too, right? And I think that that's really important. It's not just speaking to the issues, but it's also about acknowledging the resilience that is very present within our communities. One of our community members is currently, unfortunately, was in sanctuary in 2021 when she was part of the project, and Jeanette Avisguera, this is the design of one of her posters that we were able to create during the time of Phase 3 for Familias Separadas, and she is currently, on March 17th, she was forcibly taken from her workplace in Colorado, and ICE acted without a valid deportation order and detained her. And so right now, she's at risk and she's currently detained. But it just goes to show you that, you know, the images themselves can serve as a way to continue to advocate, but these issues are very still present within our country. And I won't speak too much about this. I'll just end with the fact that all the work that I've shared with you with Familias Separadas, which are little snippets, was within a span of 7 years, right? And so I've done projects shorter than that, but I feel like a deep investment in community. What does that mean? And to have that body of work to be able to still be a way to continue to advocate and, if anything, become a resource for other artists to do this work as well. And currently, I'm working on a 5-year project, these multi-year projects, and investing in my community, which is the 9th Street Market, known as the Italian Market, Mexican Market, Market of Immigrants. This is my neighborhood where I was born and raised for 40 years, and there's something really beautiful about being deeply embedded in my own community and still working through a lot of these issues around immigration that are very present even within our city, but also centering things around joy and abundance and just dreaming, which I feel like is really important. And so I'll just leave you with this beautiful image of Lydia and Joel, who are one of the produce vendors, and we revitalized one of their stands. But the initiatives in the project are around community meetings, public art to revitalize spaces, expanding the market's narrative through tours, through a digital archive. And I think for me, it's been a way of, it's a love letter back to my community. My mother worked in the market for 25 years. So it's something that's really important for me. But I think in all, and I'll end with this, is just thinking about how do we as artists in these public spaces and in navigating in these institutions begin to shift some of these power structures. How are we aware around our privilege, but then also the responsibility, right, of just, doing work in the studio versus doing work in a public space. You know, there are all these other elements that come into play. And so it is about having a balance, right, of doing this work. And so we'll speak more to that as a group, but thank you for listening.
Hello, I'm Maia Chao, and yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our discussion, and I have just 3 projects that I'll share with you kind of snippets of. 3 public art projects. One of them is Look at Art, Get Paid. I'll just jump right in, and I'm gonna read because otherwise I will ramble. So this is a collaboration with artist Josephine Davenboo. And it took place from 2015 to 2020 at the RISD Museum, was where we had our pilot. And it basically pays non-museum goers to visit museums as guest critics of the art in the institution. So someone who has never been to an art museum is invited to come in and critique the art and the museum itself. And the project we were interested in reversing flows of money, power, and knowledge between museums and the communities they neglect to serve. So this is a 2-minute excerpt from a 12-minute documentary about our pilot program. That's Look at Art, Get Paid. Its pilot involved years-long negotiation, well, first to get permission to do that project and advertise in public buses and all of that. And then over the course of the 5 years, we were able to redistribute $20,000 of private RISD money to the public and to transform the RISD Museum's policies. We were working with museum educators and a lot of museum staff who had been trying to make changes, but maybe for whatever reason having trouble making that happen at the institution. So we worked with them to shift acquisition policies, their advertisements, practices, signage, translation, and more. And we also followed up with a series of interventions into the museum's website, into their public signage, as proposed by the guest critics that you heard from and carried out by local artists. And it's been adapted by several museums at universities. And I'll point out, since we're at a university, that this was something I initiated while a grad student in school, and then continued on afterwards. And A Picture of Health is a project I did in 2022, and broadly I'm interested in the role of art in non-art contexts and the divide between what is deemed high and low art. So A Picture of Health presents artworks borrowed from the offices of 27 healthcare providers in the Philadelphia area. In each participating office, I've installed a color field painting in place of the loaned artwork as an aesthetic intervention into these spaces. For years, I had been curious about the artwork found in the offices of my doctors and therapists. And when I was on Medicaid following referral after referral for chronic pain, I remember one particularly excruciating 3-hour wait staring at a landscape painting. And this was arguably one of the longest times I've contemplated a single work of art. And it was a meditation born out of bureaucratic frustration and medical necessity. And so following Look at Art, Get Paid, this project also kind of toys with a proposition that maybe art in doctors' offices is more conducive to a populist viewership. For one, there's usually seating. And I was thinking about the violence of waiting, who's made to wait, and how being made to wait falls disproportionately to those reliant on dwindling and bottlenecking public services. And so this is the exhibition at Vox Populi, hung salon style. And then this is Creative Management, a 2023 project I did with Mural Arts as part of the People's Budget project they do every year, led by Phoebe Bachman. And in this project, this is more of a performance-based work. I'll show a 1-minute, 30-second kind of reel from a 20-minute performance. It's set in Philadelphia's Love Park, and it's a live public performance that uses the choreographic structure of 6 interconnected rolling office chairs. As bureaucratic satire, the piece explores the neoliberal co-optation of team building exercises and methods of improvisational theater into office culture. It also attempts to dramatize the gap between bureaucratic systems of governance and the urgent environmental and everyday realities they oversee. Thank you so much.
I was just thinking how I wear a button on my jacket that says all art is public. And I think there are infinite publics. And I think I'm partly saying that because the first piece doesn't present like public art, justification. Okay. Is this not working? Oh. Okay. Here we are. So I've been interested in construction barriers for a really long time. Don't ask me why. But they're ubiquitous. We see them everywhere on these lines in front of these, everywhere in city streets. And I was lucky enough to do a year-long residency at RARE. I hope many of you know of it. It's a residency situated in a construction and demolition recycling center in Northeast Philadelphia. And I got lucky that one day a truck came and dumped 30 plus of these. Uh-oh, this thing is going the other direction. Why is that? You know, I had no idea what to do with them, but I told Billy, we're keeping them all. You have storage. So I decided to make them architecture, a stand-in for the wall these barriers would ordinarily be protecting on the street. They were emptied of water and fitted with audio amplifiers that play sounds that recorded at 15 different construction sites throughout the city. You know, the soundscapes kind of moved from barrier to barrier, from building site to building site. In a way, I was trying to memorialize the continuous construction and deconstruction, the rebuilding and the expansion happening in cities across the United States, but thinking about what would it mean for me to make a portrait of my city, one that's in flux. I'm going to show this annoying video. It's a 12-minute sound piece, just to give you a sense of it. So I had the barriers on this wall, but adjacent to it was this video called Drift Tributary, and I filmed it at Rare, and so you have this sorting line of this conveyor belt, and I'm not showing the people who are sorting, but what we see in the conveyor belt is what's going to end up in the landfill. And I was thinking about, there's something heartbreaking and horrific, but those things are the things that fill our lives with meaning. So it's this strange ambivalence I have. It's much better in person, sorry. It actually starts with an ice cream truck. Is the first one in the top left corner. I can't play it. And the end is this song called Need You. So the piece is called Sampling Need You. So it's this weird bookend of this having all these construction sounds and that are annoying because they start at 7 a.m., but also knowing that someone's going to live there. But also thinking about all those sounds that are happening in a city and how we find a way to work with each other too. So I went to some sites. I went to one day. It was like a Memorial Day. It was the day before the Memorial Day weekend. So you just heard this guy saying, do we have to work on Monday? And the guy's like, I'm not going to be here. There was another one where it was this beautiful pinging sound of it sounded like music. Then I went to Temple campus where I don't know why they're building a new library, but they are. But it sounded like the underbelly of a beast. Sorry, you won't hear it. But if you go to my website, you'll see it. I'm going to move on to the next because I know we have a time thing. But it's beautiful. I got caught up in the abstraction of this. What does it mean that our lives are kind of left at this debris? But something with that abstraction is also beautiful. This is achingly beautiful, but it's trash. It's asphalt. It's a roof that no longer is functioning. Okay, next. So last spring, I unveiled a memorial to Dinah, a formerly enslaved servant known for saving Stenton House during the Revolutionary War. It was up in flames, and there's this whole story about how she convinced the soldiers to go to the room to get hay, and then the military came, and they're like, are there any people who are trying to escape the war? She's like, they're there, and so they left. So this plaque was unveiled in 1912, and it reads, I'm going to read it. In memory of Dinah, the faithful colored servant of Stenton, who by her quick thought and presence of mind saved the mansion from being burned by British soldiers in the winter of 1777. And though the plaque was the first in Philly to honor a Black woman, today in the 21st century, in a predominantly Black neighborhood, it feels insufficient. So when I imagine what kind of memorial could I make for Dinah, I combed everything I could. There is very little known about her life. There's some historical texts that mention her name. They make reference to her and even make reference to her with care. But in totality, there was kind of no knowledge, very little knowledge about her life. So my charge really became how can I keep Dinah's memory alive and active and present in the now? And I kept asking myself, unanswerable questions what can I didn't even know her last name. I was imagining who she was beyond that plaque, that historical plaque that penned and a few lines penned in manuscripts. And I thought, if I'm curious, others must be too. So I decided to create a list of questions for Dinah, which ranged from the practical, where were you born, to the intimate, what was your greatest sorrow? I also added a provocative question that I was worried the funders were going to have issue with. Did you ever wish you had let it burn? On the opposing stone tablet are inscribed questions that are just tweaked slightly. And the questions are posed to the visitor. Perhaps you can imagine that Dinah is asking these questions of you. And what would it mean, or alone in individual reflection, a question now saying, do I feel free? And on the exterior of the piece, I decided to include the original commemorative plaque. I kept feeling like the exterior feels very public, and then the interior feels really intimate. And I wanted the memorial to have this kind of extreme intimacy, but also this public statement, this public declaration. And I decided on the other side, I felt like I had to have symmetry. So the other side, I created a new plaque, and I took 2 more contemporary quotes, one from Alice Walker, healing begins where the wound was made, and the other from Lorraine Hansberry, who I just found it was gay. Damn it, I was so excited. But anyway, never be afraid to sit a while and think. So I did have some pictures of through the season. So this is last autumn. This was a couple months ago. I took this in this summer. You know, my hope is for an activated history that points to our individual and collective futurity. So this is the last piece I'm going to show. So this is Pasquino. It's one of the 16th century talking statues of Rome. And a friend mentioned them to me in passing, and it really felt like a revelation. I felt like that's what my work is trying to do. So these anonymous messages were attached to a group of 6 statues. The messages were left by the public, and they reinvented the statues as sites for protest, political dissent, for critique and commentary on the religious and political authorities of the time. In a way, they became the effigies and became the spokespeople for Rome, for the Romans. At times, the responses were posted between statues, creating this kind of ongoing dialogue between multiple histories and shifting authors. You know, I always tell my students, I don't care how old a piece is, it's always contemporary. You know, the statuary became active, mutable, and contemporary. So this takes me to Vernon Park, which is near my home, and these 2 monuments that I was always really intrigued by. So this monument is dedicated to Francis Daniel Pistorius. He was an early German settler to the neighborhood known as Germantown. I found out that he led the first Quaker protest against slavery in 1688, so that's almost 200 years before it was abolished. I also found out that during World War I and II, this monument was boxed over, was concealed. The thought was that the look and feel and the language is too Germanic. So in the center of the park is this monument dedicated to George Washington. It's called the Battle of Germantown Memorial. And it's the only Revolutionary War battle that actually was fought in Philadelphia. But I was interested in the fact that it's honoring a battle that we lost, which of course speaks to power, privilege, and access. Who gets a monument? Who is deemed worthy? I was interested in this immigrant, you know, Francis Daniel Pistorius, who's fighting for the liberation and the freedom of Black folks. And I'm thinking of another time period of George Washington fighting for America's freedom from British rule while owning slaves. So I was thinking about the complexity of that and the paradox of that, I guess the disparate histories that we all have to kind of live with in America. And I decided to kind of use that that idea, thinking about that as for my intervention, for my proposition. So I decided to shroud the Battle of Germantown Memorial in a mirrored surface, in effect boxing it up like the Pistorius Monument was in years past. I first thought I was just going to box it up, but I realized I needed to do another remix. I was like thinking, okay, this neighborhood was called Germantown. It was a German white neighborhood. So I was thinking, oh my God, mirroring it would reveal something else. So I hope the physical concealment with this reflective surface would allow the monument to feel expansive and accessible, maybe less intimidating than its colossal nature and material weightiness usually allow it to. And I was interested in invisibility. You know, depending on your location of where you enter, it seemed to disappear. And I was kind of interested in what invisibility reveals. You know, what does invisibility bring to the fore? What does it challenge? What does it suggest about notions of access and privilege? And I'm thinking, you know, if we decide to spotlight what was hidden now, how does that shift the legacy and future of the status quo? You know, it's a neighborhood park. And I was thinking, you know, these monolithic, imposing, impenetrable sculptures and how maybe most park goers view them from a physical and metaphoric distance. You know, perhaps they think the statue has nothing to do, no relevance to their lives or some history that has nothing to do with them. But I was also thinking about, you know, I've passed this hundreds of times, so maybe it's also that you just don't see them anymore. So I was thinking in a way I could make the strange, the familiar strange or uncanny. You know, often in the work, I'm trying to engage multiple histories to reveal really the fragmentary nature in which we learn about the past. and really the impossibility of a universal or objective history. I mean, it's always histories, right? I hope to point to the fact that historical narratives can be conflicting. And I think about how our present is grounded in these innumerable histories and will continue to shift over time as new knowledge is unearthed. But I was thinking, what would it mean to make a monument that it reflects the world behind you, in front of you, on top of you, below you? Kind of rid the monument of this verticality which is used to have this kind of hierarchy. And what would it mean to make a monument a living, breathing entity? What would it mean that if it's reflecting me, what is my responsibility? And in a way, it's just really trying to just rid that single perspective. So there was an event during Monument Lab, during this exhibition, there was, I think, about 25 artists who did shows. So they had this poetry thing. So I'm at the poetry reading, enjoying it. And all of a sudden, someone starts reading a poem, like, this is about my piece. So Tripita Mason, who was the Poet Laureate of Philadelphia 2 years ago, also a historian, also a Germantown resident, wrote this poem. And I used to try to read it, and I would start crying. And I just got in touch. She's like, Karyn, I just recorded it. Take my recording. So we'll have that. We might have to turn it up a little bit.
Monuments to brown boys. The artist installed a mirror over the monument, and the people have come to gawk. Rubberneckers wonder what was there before, and you have come too, laying in the cut, statue still for seconds. Your reflection edging off a 20-foot high bronze looking glass. You are an alluring hunk of stone beguiling me. Yes, you, brown boy, rough cut monolith. I see you. You are a low-slung jean-wearing grandmother greeting pillar, an obelisk marking the entrance of your hood. You need to be somebody's memorial. Not only were you laid out and lowered in the dirt, your pillow a marble headrest of past tense. He was, he once, he lived. No, you are now in present, alive and in color, and you need to be somebody's walking shrine, somebody's testament, somebody's tribute in this city. You have to be carved, stretched, and erect, a column to buttress boogeymen, the phantoms they say you imagine, the specters and goblins who told bullets and policies and laws that encase you. You need to be somebody's memento. Look how you beaming off that seeing glass. I'm catching your shine. Look at that swagger you carry, hoodie wearing, fresh fade having, full teeth grinning. You need to be somebody's something to fight for, somebody's celebration, somebody's stone-turned monument, carved and smooth, our masterpiece in this city.
Thank you.
Can we just give it up one more time for all three artists?
Thank you so much. Is our mics on? Testing. Testing,
Is it on?
testing.
Yeah, it's on. Okay.
Is it on? Yeah. Okay.
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 We're behind the speakers.
Yeah.
Wow, that was really incredible. Just the range and depths of your individual practices, and I think we really got a really good sense of the different modes that public art can be activated. I want to start off with just kind of the question that you left us with, Michelle, that I think, Karyn, your last project, The Battle is Joined, kind of perfectly bookended, is what is the role of the artist? What is your responsibility with the privilege, with the voice that you have? And how do you think about that within your practices?
Yeah, I mean, I specifically with Familias Separadas, but also with the current project that I'm working on, it actually through all the projects, it's like understanding how do we enter into spaces, right? And like, you know, we walk through spaces, but then it's also, it's like the physical space, right? And then it's also the space of collaborating and working with community members, other artists, and what does that space look like, right, in terms of how we're processing or looking at our vision, or our collective vision, right? And I do think that it is about having that balance. And in the case of familias separadas, you know, there were several instances like that evening. You know, what I talk a lot about is not just the installation itself, which was the 90-foot installation, and also having to manage that, but it was also the sense of just the energy in that day, right? In knowing that families were present with me and there were still people detained inside. We actually opened with a chant in the beginning before the installation even happened. And so it's being present, right? I think like what I love about the last piece you just shared, Karyn, is like how people interact, and like there's the art, but then it's also just what comes out of it, right? Naturally, organically. And again, switching a place of that is not representative to something that's joyful and representative. And in the case of this particular installation in front of ICE is like in a space that represents so much fear, and be fearless, right? I think that those are the moments that sometimes don't get seen, right? We have our slides and our pictures, but just that experience I feel is incredibly important. But I think it's with that knowledge of just how sometimes that reaction you can't expect, but it's how important it is to have, to be mindful of safety and security. And I think as artists, as I mentioned, we're always taking risk. But it is, you know, just even the mere act of sharing a story is a risk for some people, right? And I feel that it's important to how we're cultivating that space, whether it is, you know, what we share here stays here, right? Or okay, we have, you know, in the case of the installation, we had police presence, but I had an actual written letter from the streets commissioner that I pushed to make sure that families were safe and secure. But then there was also a conversation about safety, right, in that space. And I'll end with this too, is just, you know, when I was visiting the mothers at Berks, you know, I have the privilege of entering and exiting in this prison that the mothers do not, right? And even though I'm a child of immigrants, I'm not undocumented, I haven't been in any process of detention, the experiences are different, right? We have some cultural connections, but there is this kind of, when I speak to that privilege, right, is just being aware of that. And another really important thing is, it took me an hour and 40 minutes to arrive to Berks to meet with the mothers, and then an hour and 40 minutes to come back to Philadelphia, right? And so I had to like mentally prepare myself to be as present as I could be for the mothers in the space that they were in. There was no space for feeling sorry or having my own feelings, right? Of just like I'm angered and upset by the situation. But I also understood that would not be of any service to them or this process. And I also made sure that when I left the mothers, that I would leave them in a space of dreaming and of hope and of light. And so I would give them activities or prompts, or even like these, you know, the flowers became like, again, that moment of just like keeping your mind busy, right? But I also was very conscious of the fact that the mothers would return with their children back in their rooms. And if they were just speaking about their stories that were really traumatic, I did not want them to stay with that, right? And then for myself, which I'm interested in knowing from the other artists here, is that how do we take care of ourselves, right, in the process? And so I have, during that time, my son, who was the same age of a lot of the children that were detained at that time. And so I then had to process a lot of my own feelings coming back home and being present for my own child, right? And so, yeah, I think it's just really important to have that level of mindfulness and awareness. And sometimes if you're blinded by it, it is around how do you open a space in which that truth reveals itself and you shift and pivot to make sure that people are safe.
Yeah. There's such an extraordinary amount of care that's provided and taken for the people that you're collaborating with, and yeah, it's shown not only in the project itself, but these testimonies, and yeah, I'm just really blown away by this level of mindfulness and you just being very attunely aware of what your role is and how you use this privilege. So that's great. Yeah. Anyone else want to answer?
I mean, I feel like as an artist, I mean, maybe because I started art late, I started at 30 doing ceramics, but I feel as though my role is to be a catalyst.
Yeah.
The work is a catalyst, it's a tool, nothing kind of more than that. I was thinking about how your work is really investing in collaboration, and I kept thinking, my work is collaborative too, isn't it? But I started thinking about what do we mean by collaboration? Like, what are the tenets of collaboration? It's porosity, it's malleability, it's the what if. Like, what if? What do you think? You know? And I was thinking, you know, when we say that, I think about a project like Battles Join, where you have the incidental viewer who's not expecting an art experience, but then you have someone else who's intentionally wanting to engage the work. I think about the temperature of the temperature, the season is a collaborator. So when I think about collaboration, like all of those things play into it. I mean, the Battle is Join, I knew it was going to, on some level, it was going to be a successful piece, but I didn't predict that a week after it was up, the neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville, Virginia was going to happen. So all of a sudden, this Battle is Join and saying in this unity way, it became like a call to arms. You know, I couldn't imagine that. I knew, I mean, who doesn't love a mirror? But I didn't expect, and I was worried, I was like, oh my God, if everyone loves this piece, it's not gonna work. But then I didn't expect a prayer circle to happen. I didn't expect a man who I saw every day, troubled, who I saw with his bottle of liquor. I see him fine in the morning, by the end of the day. I didn't expect him to come up to me the moment of my biggest interview on PBS NewsHour and take me. He never spoke to me. He'd always nod at me and say, I had to kill that woman and child. I'm a Marine for life. I don't know what in that piece it became. It wasn't mine, it was ours. It allowed a space for people to, so I don't know. It's like, I think I had to trust that I know that park. Like, I think if someone came from another neighborhood, and like, who are you doing this piece that's cost $25,000 when there's a lot of poverty down the street? But I'm like, I live 5 blocks that way, so I know exactly. I think it allowed, and I think it literally, like, seeing yourself, it's like, this is ours. Like, we can claim all of it, you know? So, and then, just to say that Francis Daniel Pistorius monument was literally ratchet strapped. And literally, I think someone said to me, they must know we're still here if they let you do this. And then they fixed that other piece. So I feel like it led to these other things I shouldn't have predicted.
Yeah.
But I think me being from that neighborhood and doing a lot of research and spending time in different parts of the park, because there's the drug corner, there's the GFS kids corner, you know, it's like I have to kind of understand the whole park, you know, the dog walker, and then do the research and then kind of figure out what to do. Yeah.
Did that research look different from, let's say, other research you've done, because you're so intimately aware of this park that's in your neighborhood? What does that look like for you?
I made the assumption, like, I'm not going to have to do much research.
Right.
And then it was like, no. And then I realized I didn't engage all the folks who live there, and that allowed a different thing to happen, for sure.
Yeah. I guess I'll open up that question to Michelle and Maia, too. What does research look like for you? What are the steps that you take in fleshing out and realizing a project, and how does that differ from project to project? Perhaps like site specificity is included in that, is a factor in that. If you could just kind of shed some light on that process.
Yeah, thinking through, wow, the law of Mike, I'm adjusting to it. I feel like we're on a talk show with the deep seat.
Comfortable seat.
Yeah, very comfortable, cushion all around. Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking through the previous question of the role of the artist, and I do feel like that changes project to project, and is the like. I have to remind myself that the rubric of like what a project might accomplish shifts for each project. You can't do it all. And so I think like with Look at Our Get Paid, a lot of that was about using like digging into our own bureaucratic fluency and leveraging that, and also being really sensitive, as you're saying, to like the lived experiences of the people we're working with. And for us, it was really important not to like be making a project that would ask people to assimilate into the museum and just kind of like, you know, presume the value of it. Like a big part of it was saying like, it's not inherently valuable, or it's totally fine if you come to the museum and never come back again because this doesn't hold value for you. And so I guess a lot of that process was like interview based, and it was really important for us to have kind of pre-visit. Every time I turn this way, I lose the mic, but I want to talk to you.
I'll let Carla with you.
Yeah. But yeah, interviews and like really just thinking about like what is it in that project. We were really trying to center the existing cultural engagement that was already happening. Not to say like you have a museum-shaped hole in your life that you need to be going to museums, especially given the history of museums to kind of enlighten or civilize the masses, in quotes, in case this is being listened to. So yeah, that I think, but then like in a very different way, I think like my interventions into doctors' offices, like that felt very much like, I think you used the word defamiliarizing, like the role of the artist to defamiliarize the everyday context and help people, or hopefully give the opportunity to see something mundane in a new way and with more criticality. So those are my thoughts on some of that first question.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll also just say, you know, the standard or the standard of what you want to accomplish in every project should change, right? It shouldn't be the stagnant, repeated thing, and so yeah, it's important to do that. But with your work in particular, I love you're kind of using these everyday normal spaces and kind of putting them on its head and really challenging assumptions of value and yeah, just what's ordinary. So I really love that about your practice. But yeah, Michelle, do you want to?
Yeah, I would just say, well, one of the things that in terms of the different phases of Familias Separadas, because that's what I will focus on, because again, every project is so different and engaging, and the level of research is also varies. But in this case, it was working directly with the people doing the work, right? And this is something that I share with a lot of artists that are like, you know, sometimes we do these talks and they're students and they're like, I want to do this. I want to be in the public space. I want to work with communities. And I'm like, oh, slow your roll. First, like, do you know this community? Is there a connection? Who are the people that are doing this work? And so, you know, identifying spaces like, you know, organizations like Juntos and the Shut Down Burkes Coalition, and other activists, like finding ways to connect first with these different groups, but then also understand what has been the work that they've been doing, what have been the challenges. I think that's part of like that investigation, right? Of just understanding, okay, what have you been able to accomplish, and what could this project or this story or the placement of this work in this space could achieve, right? That all of these other spaces and strategies have not. Right. And so I think that is part of the research too, of just kind of like being mindful of that, mindfulness, right? but also having those conversations. And I think too is you know, and I don't know if this happens as well for, like, you know, going to the doctors and being like, they'll be like, what? We just put this up on the wall. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So just kind of like, again, kind of creating this sense of just, I think what we bring to the table as artists is like those prompting questions, the curiosity, the thinking of things in a very different way. And so that also shifts people's perspectives. I mean, I run into a lot with immigrant rights organizations of like, okay, here's a poster, and we're going to go into march. And for me, it was like, okay, no, actually, we can think about this in a very different way, and we can take up space in a very different way as well, right? And so I think it's having that balance of, you know, seeing what I call is like the visions, right? And going like, okay, this is what I see, but also how to easily communicate that, right? With someone who doesn't really fully understand or is not part of that like train of thought or perspective, and finding that kind of middle ground, right? But I think for me, it's like a lot of conversations, a lot of writing notes. I resonate so much with what you were just saying about the park because I walk a lot through the spaces, and I'm watching and seeing how people are interacting, who is in the space, who is not, right? What the space looks like in the daytime, what does this mean in the evening, like, and just understanding that dynamic and making notes, and how that is part of the work as well.
And like in a way, as artists, we can get away with things. Because there's a, right?
Yeah,
Because there's this,
totally.
there's a Germantown potter's field I found out from the 1700s in Germantown, and I found out, well, the story of is that the white folks who lived there, because I used to be the suburbs of downtown, they didn't want black folks buried there, so they said, here's a plot for black folks, mulattoes, and, you know, poor people. And the community, there's a projects building, there's a projects on the property. They found out there's actually this potter's field there. The city was about to take it down, and there was all this controversy about what do we do, but there's a potter's field, how do we build on top? It's a long, long, long story, but the city was going to, the people in the community said, we have to do something with that land. One person complained, so the city said, oh, well, we don't have to do anything, because one person said no. So I said, I want to make a memorial there. I mean, it's an acre empty plot that people who live surrounding it in the projects don't have access to. So I'm doing it a bureaucratic way. I'm talking to the council people, going to all the meetings. And I already have buy-in from the community. They're like, we want something to happen. And I reached a stopping point. And the community's like, we'll just do it. This spring, we'll just seed bomb it, and we'll just like plant it. They're like, let's just do it.
Yeah.
So that was another way that I reached the point where I was trying to, I got all the signatures of the original things signing and saying that we can't do anything with the land. I got them all to say, yes, we got to do it. You can do it, you can do it. I said, look, everyone's saying they want something. And this community's like, forget them. Let's just do it. So that's the plan for the next month.
Yeah.
But
And isn't that great? Yes.
Other people in the community said, Karyn, we have been trying for
Yes.
literally
Yeah.
20, like
Yes.
almost like 15 years for something to happen, and nothing's happening. You just came and like, you're going to make it happen. I was like, because I don't have to, like, we're slippery.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you can like get things in, like art can be the Trojan
It's
horse.
art. I'm like, it's
Absolutely.
art.
Yeah.
I had a block
Yes.
party. It was fun, and now the next thing.
That's why I was like, oh, for the Capitol steps, I'm like, do you want art on your steps? And then we spoke to the curator, and then we're like, oh, this is real good. I don't think this is gonna happen again. I was like the first and the last artist to do that. But the other thing is, on those Capitol steps, you know, Pennsylvania is the headquarters of the KKK, and that is where they gather. They have gathered on those steps, and so, and my defense was like, well, if the KKK can be on here, then an image of a child and a son, and her son should not be, you know, should also still be in this space. And to that point, we did a statewide, I didn't show the video because I was concerned about time. We did a statewide action that shows in the film. And we started there We had signs and everything, but the intention was, okay, what is the energy that we're placing in this space? And then we walked through a 15-minute walk to Allison Hill, where it's predominantly in Harrisburg, undocumented immigrant families, but also Black and brown families who are US citizens who also have been separated through the incarceration system, right? And I made a very clear intention of like, this is a celebration. So the energy we have on the Capitol steps is not the same energy that we're bringing into this space, because it is about, and some of the mothers that were released were there for the first time, meeting and connecting with the people who had done vigils. And so it's really important to have these celebratory moments. But then I feel like, yeah, what happens with, I think there's this kind of like, we all have this possibility. And I think as artists, we're just opening that door, right? Sometimes it is just about like, hey, you know, everybody's focused on this door, but no one's looked at like, there's 3 windows there that we can like get into, right? And so I think there's a whole art around in public art, like how do we navigate these systems, right? I also wanted to share was that the police commissioner, and I said I had met him like a few days, and Monday was when we were having the installation. I didn't get a handwritten, like to say that the city wasn't going to give me permission. If we did it on the asphalt, I would need the city's permission. If I did it on the sidewalk, I would need ICE's permission. So we're like, screw ICE. Again, here's the window. Let's focus on the street. And then months and months and months and speaking, and Mayor Michael Nutter was leaving, and so he introduced a bill with the pressure of organizing work, obviously all the organizers, and having Philadelphia start the process of becoming a sanctuary city. And in the end, I was like to the streets commissioner, who was very worried, like what message does this send to people who are not welcoming of undocumented folks? And I said, well, how about this? What message are we sending out to the undocumented community, right? Who have chosen this place to be their home and they're raising their children. And so then it's like shifting these moments where you literally have to like shift that conversation. And you know, the commissioner is not interested about my vision and like this is the theory and this is exactly what they're not interested in that, right? He's interested in like the backlash and what is he going to say to the mayor? And so it's like, how do you again navigate and have those conversations? And when we think about change in communities, and I don't want to talk too much about this, is that communities are many things. Yep. Communities are curators and people in museum spaces. Communities are nonprofit organizations or churches. Communities are US embassies, which I've had to like navigate their perspective and their expectations or stereotypes of a community that they're serving. And how do I change that perspective in that space by doing the work with the community, right? So I think that is the discussion that doesn't always happen, right? Like we've done beautiful work, but that process of getting there is an art in itself.
Yeah, totally. There are so many different types of communities, as you said, but I think something that all 3 of you are very sensitive to is listening to those communities or being aware of what those communities need, and then also offering them a sense of agency, not really assuming what they need, but kind of just amplifying or providing a platform for them. So I think that's really beautiful and poetic. And then I also just wanted to mention that what Karyn and Michelle shared is something that's really crucial for artists is how do you pivot and how do you change people's perspectives so that you turn no's into yeses. I think that is so crucial. And Maya, I know you didn't share anything about that, but I think you kind of alluded to it with Look at Art, Get Paid.
Yeah, that was a long process.
Yeah. There's always pushback, whether it's institutionally, whether it's logistically, and you have to really strategize and think creatively sometimes.
It's a long game.
Yeah.
Long game.
Oh, yeah.
And then often that story gets buried and it's championed once when there's a good reaction to it.
You don't know about all of the labor that went into it,
Yes.
right? You just see kind of the final result. I'm being very mindful of time. I have more questions, but I feel like I should open it up to the audience here. And if there are none, I can kind of kick us off. But yeah, I wanted to give you guys a chance. Yeah, please.
I have a question about.
Oh, I think there's a mic here, maybe.
Just so people can hear on the live stream. Okay, thanks. Thank you so much for sharing your really inspiring work. And I have a question about funding and finding funding. And when you're talking about these being like year-long processes, and these are pieces that are not being sold in a commercial way, just how do you kind of navigate being an artist as a career and making that financially sustainable?
Well, I'm glad I didn't go to art school. Because I went to Dartmouth and I learned how to write. I thought I went in thinking I knew how to write, and they're like, you can't. So for me, literally, I tell my students, first of all, you have to be the one who knows how to write about your work better than any curator. Don't rely on them. But you have to be able to articulate your ideas. I mean, you have to be able to learn how to write. Because that work, and it's not about writing about it, it's the thing too. And that's the way for me, the fact that I can write about the work and write what it is allows me to then be able to get funding. I mean, it really does help to be able to write. You, the Fulbright, you must be a writer too. You got a Fulbright.
Yeah, I think definitely writing. I mean, I was thinking about this, that there are definitely so many amazing artists who don't have the platform because so much of the work is administrative. And in some ways that might be, I don't know, like, yeah, it sucks, but there's so much time spent on grant applications. The majority, like way more than studio time.
I was like, I left the business world,
Yeah.
and I sit in front of a computer
exactly.
for 2/3 of my art practice.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So really hard to carve out studio time. But I mean, I do all kind of. I guess it's like foundation fund, like applying for grants, and then also I teach. Which I feel like is a way that, Karyn's teaching too. Are you teaching as well?
Just as guest speaker,
Here and
but
there,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
How do you make money?
Let's turn the attention because I have a salary.
Yeah.
well, so this is my motivation. So I'll just share this. So I come from like a working class family, and I think about, okay, I am not going to complain about sitting down and writing a grant, a $40,000 grant that will take me about 3 to 4 hours, when I know what it would take for my mother and father to work for those $40K, right? And thinking about that just helps put things in perspective, and I think that's just a privilege check from me of just like, it's just words. And these words are gonna help me get the funding that I need. Let's make it happen, right? So that's one thing, right, in terms of my motivation. Second is that, there's a large amount of community engagement work placed into the projects that I'm doing. So it is about thinking about my own stipend, my team's stipend, the stipends that I give to community members. Yes, so, and then in terms of like, I have been I'm very grateful that as of, I want to say since 2017, when I started getting these national grants, that they've increasingly have gotten bigger, right? And that's not an expectation that I've had, it's just by doing the work, by being able, and very similar to like the administrative part. So I have a master's in arts and cultural management that I got, a degree that I got from actually Rosemont, who's not that far from us. And so what I was able to learn very early on as like coming right out from undergrad is like the structures of a nonprofit arts organization, the structures of a college and a university, running a theater. Like I've been offered 3 executive director positions because I can be a very good administrator. I can also be a very good professor in a university. And I think of that as like my retirement, like, because then I'll sit still. But I think it's also just like what I prefer being an artist. And again, not that you're not an artist by doing it, but you have to balance those things. But then it's also just kind of like, it's understanding the bureaucracy that sometimes happens in colleges or universities, as well as the hustle and bustle of the nonprofit business, I was gonna say, but system, right? And so the other huge thing was that I worked for a small arts foundation. And so Leeway Foundation is a great, like Leeway Foundation, which gives grants to women artists and that focus on social change work. They were one of the first people that believed in me. And I got an Art and Change grant. It was $2,500. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much money, right? But it is about being persistent, writing. And then when you get rejected, which is what I tell a lot of artists, ask for feedback, always, right? Have an understanding, like that has made me a better grant writer. It's made me, and sometimes it is like, I didn't get the grant, but the people who were reviewing this grant were folks that never knew of me, and now they know, right? But my most recent grant, which was through the William Penn Foundation, and in partnership with Mural Arts Program, because they're a partner in the Art Market project I'm doing in my community, because we're doing a lot of like heavy work in terms of revitalizing produce stands, light boxes, like this is just, it's like multiple projects in one. But I was able to get like a multi-year grant, right? And so I think that that's the other part of just understanding your network and the spaces that you are in. But also not selling yourself short, like always thinking about, well, how am I paying myself in this space? So it's all of those factors. But I was doing part-time and working. And I also have a spouse who has a full-time job, right? So that also is something that is critical, is important to understand and know in terms of the dynamic. So.
Yeah, as a person who has been on juries for grants, I will say writing is so important. If you don't know how to talk about your own work, you know, how are you going to explain it for other people? How are other people going to understand it? And so, yeah, you first and foremost need to know how to articulate your practice and know what you're kind of applying for.
Know how much things cost.
Yeah.
Know what your goals and objectives are and how you're going to achieve those objectives. How do you speak to, if it is engaging audiences, do you really know your audience? Like, so, or community, right? And so I think it is, the writing is important, but it's also like that it's genuine, that it's not just about the art, right? It is about, when people see this proposal, they're like, how is this money going to be put to good use, right?
What's the impact? Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Since we're talking about words, I noticed that throughout the different public artworks that y'all did, that there were different forms of written language. So I'm curious because in some cases, the written language made the art more accessible. In other cases, it was catered to certain publics, for example, using Spanish and English. So I'm curious as to, like, in your opinions, with your art, what is the value in using written language?
I just spoke a whole bunch, so I will keep this short as that.
I don't have many words.
Yeah, I don't have
Yeah.
many words either. I think this is you,
Yeah.
Michelle.
Well, I am a painter by, like, that's where I feel like, you give me a wall and I can say, yes, I can paint this like massive image. But I think the words, sometimes by removing the figure and just focusing on the words and the phrases, and in this case, the importance of being heard, right? Whether it is through the words or through the audio stories themselves and how that's represented in each one of the pieces. I think that in the case of Familias Separadas, the words are very direct. And so it's important for that message to get across. I think one of the challenges and when we talked earlier about the balance between organizers and organizing efforts, especially around the billboards, some of the activists wanted to really present like campaigns or like really direct the messaging towards the governor. And my pushback was, no, actually the words of the mothers are way more powerful than targeting or being defensive towards a particular political figure that is not doing his job, right? And so the words become that direct way of communicating, but what those words are and where they're coming from, I feel sometimes it's just much more powerful than a figure in the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like, all three of you are employing language in different ways, but it's more often than not a launching off point, right? Karyn, I love with the Dina Memorial, you're kind of activating history and you're almost speculating on who this person was and you're memorializing this figure who's been long ignored for the most part. And so, I think it's kind of this moment for people to imagine her in their own ways. And then with you, Maia, it's quite a functional aspect, right, of at least look at art, get paid. And I also love that you advertised in both English and Spanish because you're really aware of audiences and you were very mindful of what are the demographics that have traditionally been ignored. And so
and I guess I can speak to like with that one, just also looking at the form, like when we were riding the buses just like through Providence for our own purposes, we were seeing all these sleep studies or like just different like sign up for this, and so that was kind of the language we were, or like we were trying to read and base the form that we chose the advertisement to be legible in a way that would make sense in those spaces. So I guess like visual language too, and like people in that project, so many folks were like, I didn't even know this was a museum, because art spaces are so good at signaling so cryptically to a very select few that what their signage, their, like placards, all of that. So that came up a lot in thinking about how we communicate the project.
Yeah, I mean, museums are historically very exclusionary, privileged spaces, and those legacies are still very much prevalent today. Kind of like a side thing that wasn't included in Maia's Look at Art, Get Paid, but you mentioned how you organized a series of interventions based off of people's feedback. And one of my favorites are the signs that you put out in front of RISD.
I guess that's some language text-based work that I didn't show, but
is it included in?
I don't think I have slides of that. But it was like we used auto dealership flags outside the museum as a different way of signaling, and we actually found words that overlapped with both like different businesses, like performance and value and welcome. And so we've selected from that set of words, the words that were also applicable to art in the museum. Value was a really good one. But and look, welcome, beauty salons. So yeah, that was one thing. And then also we superimposed on the website handwritten notes from the critics, so that when you come to the RISD Museum's website, you could see first-time museum visitors' handwriting scrawled on top of the website with their observations of and questions. Some of them like about restitution and like what are these objects doing here. So like a lot of key like kind of art historical questions that these people were asking on their first visit to the museum.
Yeah, great. I think we have maybe time for one more question. Sure, please.
It's coming.
Usually very loud, so I don't get it. Everything that you showed us seems so resonant with the current situation that we're in. The current administration, things that are going on with the arts, obviously issues in communities, immigration, so forth. So I'm kind of curious about what projects you have planned, if you can talk about them. In particular, looking at the fact that, you know, Philadelphia is all geared up to celebrate the 2026, and this celebration of our democracy at a time when we seem to be doing the opposite of what we've been about all this time. And, you know, your art seems to show how we can cut through that, reach people emotionally in ways that maybe other things don't. So I'm really curious about what you have planned, because what you've done so far is so amazing that, you know, I don't know, we can start a revolution with art is what I'm hoping.
What you got going?
Well, I mean, it's a really good question. I feel like every day looking at the news, I feel the honest answer is like in terms of what's happening now, I don't know. I'm overwhelmed. And like, yeah, it's interesting being teaching in a school right now and seeing how it's impacting undergrads. Many of my students were like 10 when Trump was first elected. So just knowing how that's shaping, and our relationship to phones, like how that's shaping how we, like the constant, you know, it's so wild to be like on Instagram looking at, you know, getting ads for shoes and then, you know, seeing like ICE, like detaining some. So it's just like the amount of media that we're.
I feel like the beginning of my semester, I mean, I'm teaching a political class. It's public of one, public of many. So already it's there. And I feel as though the first couple of weeks, I was like, are we going to pretend nothing's going on? We're getting ready to make work that's for the public.
Yeah.
And then it just shifted like third or fourth week maybe. And now I feel as though we have almost like a debrief of where we're at.
Yeah.
But it's kind of amazing because, I mean, it started off with they had to make a work for a stranger. And the way they did it was amazing things that they thought of. Then it was making a work for our class, and then now it's the community. So we're doing a project for the Tyler School of Art for our, and the semester, I'm like, what kind of event are we going to do? So it's going to be called the People's Ball. And we're having this thing, we're having these 5 huge beach balls, and we're each making an obstacle course. So there's going to be a ball pit of despair. So people can put their despair, the thing in there, and then someone's like, knock them down. They can knock us down, we get back up. So this big like inflatable thing, you have to kind of push the ball through. So there's all these events, then we have the insecurity hot potato. So the bacon bits, so you've got a lot of bacon bits in there. So what's going on there? So it's a way of like, how can we have joy and fun, but also at the same time, you know, deal?
Yes.
I also gave them this billboard project, and it was amazing. You know, it came up, the anniversary coming up, and someone's billboard was like May 13th, 1985, with the MOVE bombing. Someone else had 92.261, which is like the Equal Rights Bill. Someone made a funny one, like Mr. T saying, I don't pity the fool who's down with oligarchical rule. So like, we're not gonna do these billboards, we're like, but we're gonna have these t-shirts that people could print out. So that was our way of like, how can we have fun, but also, I mean, the despair is pretty grim, but this project that we're doing, and we're also going to make a resource zine, but the funny thing is, I had to, when I gave the proposal to the school to get money, and they said because it's a temple-funded project, they had to know exactly what resources were going to be on the zine, what the T-shirts were. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? So I didn't give them all of it. I
Yeah.
gave them some.
Be ambiguous.
I'm like, no, I'm not giving them
Like,
all.
here, Mr.
Deal
T.
with it. The money's already spent. What are you going to do? Fire me? I'm full professor. You know? But I like that. They're like, oh, Karyn, this sounds amazing. I'm like, you don't know all of it, but because I'm sure things are going to happen.
Yeah.
But in terms of a project I'm working on, I just started this month. I'm the artist in residence with the Free Library of Philadelphia for the year. It's through the Performance Arts Initiative. So that's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do. I got my email address like yesterday. But I'm thinking but I feel like, in a way, libraries are like the most democratic. I feel as though maybe it's the last space for knowledge and for democracy, because higher ed is done. K through 12 has been done. So like maybe libraries are the place, or I feel as though museums. I had a grad student, okay, this is the last thing I'm gonna say. I had a grad student who did this amazing piece. This is before Trump. Was it before Trump? No, it was when Trump got elected. They did this piece where they filled the walls, the partition walls in the gallery space for the thesis show with canned goods and bottled water. And their idea was that, if the revolution comes, if they come for us, museums should be spaces where people come. Like, it shouldn't be just churches. It shouldn't just be this. Like, what would it mean for the museum to be the site that you come when you need the support? So I'm trying as an artist, professor, I'm trying.
Yeah. Did you have?
Yeah. I think that I feel very tired.
Yeah.
And I just, and this is even today, we're like going to do this talk, and then I'm like, okay, how can I feel like we could focus on the work that we've been doing, because we have been doing the work, right? So that's another really important thing to just acknowledge of like, it's one of like, if anybody just woke up because of the recent election, okay, welcome. But
the rest of us?
This has been happening for a very long time. And so obviously there is disappointment, not surprise, but I think it's, for me, then looking at my feed, and I have artists, in my network of artists, right, who are doing really important work in communities that are activists as well, are organizing, and so for some, it was like, all right, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to get together, and like we have to fight stronger. And then I refuse to write that in any of my feeds or anything. Honestly, I didn't even post anything about it, because I just felt like, no, we actually need to just be grounded and take care of ourselves. Right, because the way that things are going, it's set up to feel despair, to feel fear, to feel powerless. And I think it's really important to quiet the storm, the created storm, and focus on, and I say this for myself, it's like focus on myself, my family. My mom has already been, not in this administration, but in the previous Trump administration, was racially profiled, and so it's like, no, this hits home, right? They're U.S. citizens, but they're also immigrants, and so how are we mindful of that and taking care of ourselves and our community, right? Because it's impossible to think about, let me think about my next art project when your core could be not stable, right, and not grounded. So I just want to share that, because I feel like there's a lot of conversation about, we got to fight harder, we got to get organized, we got to do this. But in order to do that, and to do it for the long haul, we need to take care of ourselves. I'm saying that out loud for myself too, right? Because we really, really do, right? In order for us to do that. And what I'm working on right now, which has been a project that started in 2013 in my community. No, it was, has it been? No, that was Familias Separadas, I'm sorry. That was like, isn't that far back? In 2019, sorry. But it was right before, in 2020, at the height of the Black Lives Matters like protests and movements that were happening. This is when the Frank Rizzo statue was brought down at the municipal building, but also was whitewashed and erased in my community, in the market, right? And so what surfaced, right? And I say, when I say my community, I created our market project for many people that feel the same way as I do, that I can feel deeply rooted in a place and othered at the same time, right? And so what I have been trying to do, and again, inserting the joy, right, in this work because it is necessary, is like doing tours, reminding descendants of immigrants that they are descendants of immigrants, right? And also speaking through the artwork, public artworks, through these interactions with produce vendors, through community members that have either lived in the community 40 plus years like myself or recently arrived, of what the market is and what it has represented, and that a lot of the groups, whether it's been the Great Migration or all of these other different immigrant groups that have been in the market, have all been affected by these political and unjust systems in their own native countries, and then have had to deal with the unjust systems within this country, and specifically in the dynamics of this city, right? And so on a back out view, people are like, oh, that's a nice community arts project. But the conversations and the connection and the shifting of perspectives, like there were a lot of folks that voted for Trump that were also of immigrant descent, right? And predominantly in parts of South Philadelphia, not that far from the market. And so how to be in a space, in a position to, again, the sense of reminder and connection, because the market still continues to be what it has been. And to speak to collective power in a way of just kind of reminding people, like this is what these ancestors of this space have had to deal with, that we're still currently dealing with to this place. So I think finding those points of connection and reinforcing that bridge, whether it is, again, telling a story, inviting someone to share a story, or having dinner. Like I've done dinners and gatherings. So that's part of the work that I'm doing right now. But again, I'm deeply invested, not that I haven't been for other projects, but this is also my own community. And so in the wake of the Frank Rizzo mural being erased, it resurfaced a lot of the racism and xenophobia that already existed within my neighborhood. And so the work that I'm doing is, in a sense, providing a space of connection and healing. And that's where that's where it's not necessarily I'm starting from, it's like, that's where I'm at right now, right? And we'll see.
Yeah, I guess I'll sign off with two notes, just with your responses, is that I think people sometimes underestimate how much of your own energy and your mental, physical energy that you exert when you're working on projects, especially when it is socially engaged or if there is a public component. And it's really easy to get burnt out. And so, yeah, that's a really great reminder, Michelle, that you have to take care of yourself and you have to recharge yourself. But also it's a great reminder that, you guys are thinking about community, but also remember your own communities of artists and and friends that you can really be in communion with. I think that's so invigorating, and it really fuels me. Really, it fills me. And I guess that leads to the second point: is that we're very much only at the start of this moment where we are constantly bombarded. And I think it's okay to take time to not take action, just process and grieve and mourn. And when you're ready, let's get up and let's mobilize. Let's get to work. But for now, it's okay to not know what you're going to do. I think that's very, very normal, regardless of if you're an artist or not. So,
and also separating, sometimes being able to just get involved in political organizing outside of art making too,
Totally.
like not burdening it all with doing everything at once.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to Michelle, Karyn, and Maia for coming and speaking tonight. Yeah, it's been such an honor to be in conversation with you three. Yeah, and thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I know we went kind of long, but it was a great conversation. So,
Let's do it.
yeah.